Hello, this is Morel Bernard with the continuation of the story Dracula. Last words for Dracula was that as he spoke, he put the money remaining into his pocket, took the title deeds and the bundle as Harker had left them, and swept the remaining things into the open fireplace, where he set fire to them with a match. Please subscribe to Study Coach UK channel. Please subscribe and please share. So let me continue with the story Dracula. Goldman and Morris had rushed out into the yard, and Harker had lowered himself from the window to follow the Count. He had, however, bolted the stable door, and by the time they had forced it open there was no sign of him. Van Helsing and I tried to make inquiry at the back of the house, but the mews was deserted and no one had seen him depart. It was now late in the afternoon and sunset was not far off. We had to recognize that our game was up. With heavy hearts we agreed with the professor when he said, "Let us go back to Madame Nina. Poor dear Madame Nina. All we can do just now is done, and we can there at least protect her. But we need not despair. There is but one more earth box, and we must try to find it. When that is done, all may be yet well." I could see that he spoke as bravely as he could to comfort Harker. The poor fellow was quite broken down. Now and again he gave a low groan, which he could not suppress. He was thinking of his wife. With sad hearts, we came back to my house, where we found Mrs. Harker waiting for us, with an appearance of cheerfulness which did honour to her bravery and unselfishness. When she saw our faces, her own became as pale as death. For a second or two, her eyes were closed, as if she were in secret prayer. And then she said, cheerfully, "I can never thank you all enough. Oh, my poor darling." As she spoke, she took her husband's grey head in her hands and kissed it. "Lay your poor head here and rest it. All will yet be well, dear. God will protect us, if he so will it in his good intent." The poor fellow groaned. There was no place for words in his sublime misery. We had a sort of perfunctory supper together, and I think it cheered us all up somewhat. It was perhaps the mere animal heat of food to hungry people, for none of us had eaten anything since breakfast, or the sense of companionship may have helped us. But anyhow, we were all less miserable, and saw the morrow as not altogether without hope. True to our promise, we told Mrs. Harker everything which had passed, and although she grew snowy white at times when danger had seemed to threaten her husband, and red at others when his devotion to her was manifested, she listened bravely and with calmness. When we came to the part where Harker had rushed at the Count so recklessly, she clung to her husband's arm and held it tight as though her clinging could protect him from any harm that might come. She said nothing, however, till the narration was all done and matters had been brought right up to the present time. Then, without letting go her husband's hand, she stood up amongst us and spoke. Oh, that I could give any idea of the scene of that sweet, sweet, good woman, in all the radiant beauty of her youth and animation, with a red scar on her forehead, of which she was conscious, and which we saw with grinding of our teeth, remembering whence and how it came. Her loving kindness against our grim hate, her tender faith against all our fears and doubting. And we, knowing that so far as symbols went, she with all her goodness and purity and faith was outcast from God. "Jonathan," she said, and the words sounded like music on her lips. It was so full of love and tenderness. "Jonathan, dear, and you all my true friends, I want you to bear something in mind through all this dreadful time. I know that you must fight, that you must destroy, even as you destroy the false Lucy, so that the true Lucy might live hereafter. But it is not a work of hate. That poor soul who has wrought all this misery is the saddest case of all. Just think what will be his joy when he too is destroyed and is worse apart, that his better part may have spiritual immortality. You must be pitiful to him too, though it may not hold your hands from his destruction." As she spoke, I could see her husband's face darken and draw together, as though the passion in him were shriveling his being to its core. Instinctively, the clasp on his wife's hand grew closer, till his knuckles looked white. She did not flinch from the pain which I knew she must have suffered, but looked at him with eyes that were more appealing than ever. As she stopped speaking, he leaped to his feet, almost tearing his hand from hers as he spoke. "May God give him into my hand just for long enough to destroy that earthly life of him which we are aiming at. If beyond it I could send his soul for ever and ever to burn in hell, I would do it." "Oh, hush, oh, hush, in the name of the good God. Don't say such things, Jonathan, my husband, or you will crush me with fear and horror. Just think, my dear, I have been thinking all this long day of it, that perhaps some day I too may need such pity, and that some other like you, and with equal cause for anger, may deny it to me. Oh, my husband, indeed, I would have spared you such a thought had there been another way. But I pray that God may not have treasured your wild words, except as the heart-broken wail of a very loving and sorely stricken man. O God, let these poor white hairs go in evidence of what he has suffered, who all his life has done no wrong, and on whom so many sorrows have come." We men were all in tears now. There was no resisting them, and we wept openly. She wept too, to see that her sweeter counsels had prevailed. Her husband flung himself on his knees beside her, and put it in his arms round her, and hid his face in the folds of her dress. Van Hessling beckoned to us, and we stole out of the room, leaving the two loving hearts alone with their God. Before they retired, the professor fixed up the room against any coming of the vampire, and assured Mrs. Harker that she might rest in peace. She tried to school herself to the belief, and manifestly, for her husband's sake, tried to seem content. It was a brave struggle, and was, I think and believe, not without its reward. Van Helsing had placed a bell, which either of them was to sound in case of any emergency. When they had retired, Quincy, Goldman, and I arranged that we should sit up, dividing the night between us and watch over the safety of the poor stricken lady. The first watch falls to Quincy, so the rest of us shall be off to bed as soon as we can. Goldman has already turned in, for his is the second watch. Now that my work is done, I too shall go to bed. Jonathan Harker's journal, the 3rd to the 4th of October, close to midnight. I thought yesterday would never end. There was over me a yearning for sleep, in some sort of blind belief that to wake would be to find things change, and that any change must now be for the better. Before we parted, we discussed what our next step was to be, but we could arrive at no result. All we knew was that one earth box remained, and that the Count alone knew where it was. If he chooses to lie hidden, he may baffle us for years, and in the meantime, the thought is too horrible. I dare not think of it even now. This I know, that if ever there was a woman who was all perfection, that one is my poor, wronged darling. I love her 1,000 times more for her sweet pity of last night, a pity that made my own hate of a monster seem despicable. Surely God will not permit the world to be the poorer by the loss of such a creature. This is hope to me. We are all drifting reefwards now, and faith is our only anchor. Thank God, Mina is sleeping, and sleeping without dreams. I fear what her dreams might be like, with such terrible memories to gird them in. She has not been so calm within my seeing since the sunset. Then for a while there came over her face a repose which was like spring after the blast of March. I thought at the time that it was the softness of the red sunset on her face, but somehow now I think it has a deeper meaning. I'm not sleepy myself, though I'm weary to death. However, I must try to sleep, for there is tomorrow to think of, and there is no rest for me until. Later. I must have fallen asleep, for I was awakened by Mina, who was sitting up in bed with a startled look on her face. I could see easily, for we did not leave the room in darkness. She had placed a warning hand over my mouth, and now she whispered in my ear, "Hush, there is someone in the corridor." I got up softly and, crossing the room, gently opened the door. Just outside, stretched on a mattress, lay Mr. Morris, wide awake. He raised a warning hand for silence as he whispered to me, "Hush, go back to bed. It is all right. One of us will be here all night. We don't mean to take any chances." His look and gesture forbade discussion, so I came back and told Mina. She sighed, and positively a shadow of a smile stole over her poor, pale face as she put her arms round me and said softly, "Oh, thank God for good, brave men." With a sigh, she sank back again to sleep. I write this now as I am not sleepy, though I must try again. 4th October morning. Once again during the night I was wakened by Mina. This time we had all had a good sleep, for the grey of the coming dawn was making the windows into sharp oblongs, and the gas flame was like a speck rather than a disk of light. She said to me hurriedly, "Go, call the professor. I want to see him at once." "Why?" I asked. "I have an idea. I suppose it must have come in the night, and matured without my knowing it. He must hypnotize me before the dawn, and then I shall be able to speak. Go quick, dearest. The time is getting close." I went to the door. Dr. Seward was resting on the mattress, and seeing me, he sprang to his feet. "Is anything wrong?" he asked in alarm. "No," I replied. "But Mina wants to see Dr. Heslin at once." "I will go," he said, and hurried into the professor's room. In 2 or 3 minutes later, Van Heslin was in the room in his dressing gown, and Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming were with Dr. Seward at the door asking questions. When the professor saw Mina smile, a positive smile ousted the anxiety of his face, he rubbed his hands and he said, "Oh, my dear Madame Mina, this is indeed a change. See, friend John, we have got our dear Madame Mina as of old back to us today." Then, turning to her, he said cheerfully, "And what am I to do for you? For at this hour you do not want me for nothings." "I want you to hypnotize me," she said. "Do it before the dawn, for I feel that then I can speak, and speak freely. Be quick, for the time is short." Without a word, he motioned her to sit up in bed. Looking fixedly at her, he commenced to make passes in front of her, from over the top of her head downward, with each hand in turn. Mina gazed at him fixedly for a few minutes, during which my own heart beat like a trip hammer, for I felt that some crisis was at hand. Gradually her eyes closed and she sat, stock still. Only by the gentle heaving of her bosom could one know that she was alive. The professor made a few more passes and then stopped, and I could see that his forehead was covered with great beads of perspiration. Mina opened her eyes, but she did not seem the same woman. There was a far-away look in her eyes, and her voice had a sad dreaminess which was new to me. Raising his hand to impose silence, the professor motioned to me to bring the others in. They came on tiptoe, closing the door behind them, and stood at the foot of the bed looking on. Mina appeared not to see them. The stillness was broken by Van Heslin's voice speaking in a low-level tone which would not break the current of her thoughts. "Where are you?" The answer came in a neutral way. "I do not know. Sleep has no place it can call its own." For several minutes there was silence. Mina sat rigid, and the professor stood staring at her fixedly. The rest of us hardly dared to breathe. The room was growing lighter. Without taking his eyes from Mina's face, Dr. Van Heslin motioned me to pull up the blind. I did so, and the day seemed just upon us. A red streak shot up, and a rosy light seemed to diffuse itself through the room. On the instant, the professor spoke again. "Where are you now?" The answer came dreamily, but with intention. It were as though she were interpreting something. I've heard her use the same tone when reading her shorthand notes. I do not know. It is all strange to me. What do you see? I can see nothing. It is all dark. What do you hear? I could detect the strain in the professor's patient voice. The lapping of water. It is gurgling by, and little waves leap. I can hear them on the outside. Then you are on a ship. We all looked at each other, trying to glean something each from the other. We were afraid to think. The answer came quick. Oh, yes. What do you hear? The sound of men stamping overhead as they run about. There's a creaking of a chain, and the loud tinkle as a check or the capstan falls into the racket. What are you doing? I am still. Oh, so still. It is like death. The voice faded away into a deep breath, as of one sleeping, and the open eyes closed again. By this time the sun had risen, and we were all in the full light of day. Dr. Van Helsing placed his hands on Mina's shoulders and laid her head down softly on her pillow. She lay like a sleeping child for a few moments, and then with a long sigh awoke and stared in wonder to see us all around her. Have I been talking in my sleep? Was all she said. She seemed, however, to know the situation without telling, though she was eager to know what she had told. The professor repeated the conversation, and she said, "Then there is not a moment to lose. It may not be yet too late." Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming started for the door, but the professor's calm voice called them back. "Stay, my friends. That ship, wherever it was weighing anchor whilst she spoke. There are many ships weighing anchor at the moment in your so great port of London. Which of them is it that you seek? God be thanked that we have once again a clue, though whither it may lead us we know not. We have been blind somewhat, blind after the manner of men, since when we can look back we see what we might have seen looking forward, if we had been able to see what we might have seen. Alas, but that sentence is a puddle, is it not? We can know now what was in the Count's mind when he seized that money. Though Jonathan's so fierce knife him put him in the danger that even he dread. He meant escape. Hear me, escape. He saw that with but one earth box left, and a pack of men following like dogs after a fox, this London was no place for him. He have take his last earth box on board a ship, and he leave the land. He think to escape, but no, we follow him. Tally-ho, as friend Arthur would say when he put on his red frock. Our old fox is wily, oh so wily, and we must follow with wile. I too am wily, and I think his mind in a little while. In meantime, we may rest and in peace, for there are waters between us which he do not part, and which he could not, if he would, unless the ship were to touch the land, and then only at full or slack tide. See, and the sun is just rose, and all day to sunset is to us. Let us take bath and dress and have breakfast, which we all need, and which we can eat comfortably, since he be not in the same land with us. Mina looked at him appealingly as she asked, "But why need we seek him further when he is gone away from us?" He took her hand and patted it as he replied, "Ask me nothings as yet. When we have breakfast, then I answer all questions." He would say no more, and we separated to dress. After breakfast, Mina repeated her question. He looked at her gravely for a minute and then said sorrowfully, "Because, my dear, dear Madame Mina, now more than ever must we find him, even if we have to follow him to the jaws of hell." She grew paler as she asked faintly, "Why?" "Because," he answered solemnly, "he can live for centuries, and you are but mortal woman. Time is now to be dreaded, since once he put that mark upon your throat." I was just in time to catch her as she fell forward in a faint. Join me, Morale Bernard, for the next video of Dracula. Join me for the next video of Dracula. Look forward to seeing you then. Okay, bye-bye.